Kia kara kia tātou, whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, ki mā taratara ki tai. E hi aki ana, te atakura, he tiu, he huka, he hohu, tihei mauri ora. Morning everyone, and thank you for coming to the second Thursday in a row, Policy and Planning Committee, today for our decisions on Plan Change 78 for the city centre. We've got absence from Haukura member Ashby. We have lateness from Councillor Fully. I think she's messaged me aiming around 11:30.
Mr. Chair, I have to go on council business by 2:45 if we're not finished.
We will definitely be finished by then, but
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you.
It is in everyone's hands. I don't know. It is dark. And Councillor, speaking of timing, if we could have some order and get back to the Councillor Walker early departure. Can I have a mover? Councillor Filipina. I'll second. All those in favour? Aye. There are no petitions. Oh, sorry. Electronic attendance. We've got Councillor Fully, Councillor Bartley, Councillor Leone, and I think that's all. Deputy Mayor and Mayor will move in second. All those in favour? Aye. Are there any declarations of interest? Are there any petitions? There's no public input. There's no local board input. There's no extraordinary items. Right, we will go to, is it Celia and John are going to kick off? Celia? Cool, and we've had lots of workshops on this. We should know where we're at. We'll go to the staff. There'll be plenty of questions, I'm sure, as this has been a quick turnaround from when we got the IHP decisions about 10 days ago.
Can I raise a point of order? Could I move this item now?
Yep, I'm happy for you to move, and I'll second. Okay.
It's so popular, everybody wants to know it.
Well, it's not really a point of order, Member Henare, and I did go to the staff, but no. And this is why we go to 2 p.m. Cool. Can Celia? Thank you.
Okay, Morena, Chair and Councillors. Sitting with me today is John Dogood and Elizabeth Laird, who is the lead planner who had been managing this process for us through the IHP, and Diana Hartley from DLA Piper, who was our chief legal counsel for this process. Today we're seeking the Council's decisions on the IHP, or the Independent Hearing Panel's recommendations on the city centre provisions in proposed Plan Change 78, and seeking a direction to staff to undertake the necessary steps to make the provisions operative for the IHP recommendations that are accepted by the Council. So I've got a short presentation, and I know we've done a workshop with you, so you're probably familiar with some of this information. So is it this one? Which one do I press to get? Is it that one? So that's the extent of the city centre boundary. So what the recommendation is doing is it's enabling additional development capacity through the removal of the maximum floor area ratio, which we call the FAR. It's giving increased general building height, moving it from between 30 and 50 metres to 72.5 metres. It's giving increased height in some of the precincts. That includes the Karangahape Road precinct, the Learning precinct, the Key Park precinct, Viaduct Harbour precinct, and the Wynyard precinct. It also provides for qualifying matters to be applied where appropriate to recognise the unique characteristics of part of the city centre and to allow sunlight into key areas of public open space. This is just a diagram or a map to show you what was in the operative unitary plan. And you'll note that the general building height on this map are the areas coloured in blue, purple, essentially blue and purple. The recommendations provide for an increase in height in the general building height area, which is the green bit in the middle, and that, that's the special height area in the green bit, and that's giving unlimited height. In the yellow areas, it's where it's called the special height area. No, sorry, that's called the general building height area, and that is going to 72.5, and there's also a recommendation to add a bit if I can show with the pointer, well, it's the little bit around at the bottom there, near Queen Street and near the Mayoral Drive. So the decision process today is set out in Clause 101 of Schedule 1 of the RMA. The Council is required to make decisions on these recommendations. It must decide whether to accept or reject each recommendation, and Auckland Council's decisions must be notified by the 30th of May. That came through in the Minister's direction. Public notification of accepted recommendations will include the date when the provisions will be made operative. So today, the process is to either accept all or accept some of the recommendations, which will then be publicly notified, and those parts which are accepted will become operative. I just want to note that if there are no appeals on this process, the only way in which somebody can challenge the process is through judicial review. Sorry. So the other element of this process is that some recommendations can be rejected. If they are rejected, we have to provide a reason for the rejection and provide alternative recommendations. All rejections are then referred to the Minister for RM reform for a decision. The Minister will then consider the recommendations and the Council's alternative recommendation and make a decision. The IHP recommendations were received on the 8th of May, which was not that far away. They agreed with the Council's overall approach, and there was full support of the Council's economic evidence. They preferred the Council's planning and other expert evidence in most cases, and supported most of Council's proposed provisions. Our recommendation is to accept all of the recommendations from the IHP. Open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Councillor Ferry.
Kia ora. So with the accepting of the recommendations from the IHP, if I don't think the recommendation goes far enough, so for example, the special height area should be larger, that would make the general smaller, Chair. Yeah. Yeah, well, I do also think the general should be higher, but that's not the point. If I think that the special height area, for example, should be larger than the IHP recommendation, is that really a grounds for rejection?
Through the Chair, perhaps I'll respond to that. So what the Council, the committee would be required to do is provide the reasons why it's being rejected.
Yep.
And those reasons would have to link to a submission and a particular piece of evidence that the panel heard.
Yep.
And your resolutions would need to record those reasons. Diana may be able to add further if you need any more information, but it is that linking it very clearly to evidence that was before the panel.
Yep.
And providing very clear reasons as to why the committee is not accepting that recommendation or several recommendations.
Okay, so, I mean, I guess what I'm grappling with this is, I would like in some places for things to go further, but that's not necessarily a reason to reject the conclusion that they've come to. I would just like it to be more. So, yeah, thank you. That is a helpful answer for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I'm going to ask it a different way. If you wanted it to be higher, we could change it in the unitary plan next year, couldn't we?
Yes, through the Auckland Unitary Plan review, which will be happening in the next couple of years, yes.
Okay, thank you. There we go. But my question was, bearing in mind we now have to make up capacity everywhere, what is the capacity? I know you said you haven't done the modelling. Have you any idea what this modelling will give us with regards to working towards our 2 million?
So with the economic evidence, based the evidence showed that we are getting 4 times as much enabled capacity in the city centre as a result of our changes to the provisions. We haven't done the modelling of what the recommendations are giving us, but we know it will be more because they've enabled more height. They've made changes to some of the standards, the bulk standards, so we can get more capacity within the city centre.
I suppose what I'm saying here, it would be really handy to know, because this is our starter for 10, right? When we do the rest. When do you think we'll be able to get that modelling?
Maybe I'll get Megan to answer that, because this is part of the original plan change. So anything here is not connected to the reduction and increase in the next plan change. So the city centre was already done. So Megan, did you want to? No.
That's a key point. That's a key point. I missed that point.
Councillor Walker.
I've got a question just around that goes to the delineation, particularly up in the K Road precinct. And my question goes like this. My understanding was that the council evidence was to leave it as it is, in line with accepting Kirkpatrick's submission. And we're deviating from that now, particularly up at the top where you've got the petrol station, and yes, it's accepted that the petrol station's out because, you know, that's gone. But you've got this contiguous relationship that goes to the heritage provisions, and the heritage provisions, I understand, are a higher level of planning than what we're looking at around the precinct. So why is that? Why aren't we maintaining the integrity that we've had prior?
Perhaps I'll start. We do have Elizabeth here. Elizabeth can only really speak to the case that the council put forward at the hearings, but this is the western portion of Karangahape Road. There was a recent resource consent application declined in that area that some of you may be aware of. The current height limit in that western end of Karangahape Road, opposite the mobile service station, for those who are familiar with it, is 15 metres in the operative plan. Plan change 78 proposed to increase that to 35, and the hearings panel has recommended that 35 height limit applies. So that's the height limit. In addition to that, the Karangahape Road area as a whole is within the Karangahape Road precinct in the unitary plan, and the precinct in the operative plan, the current plan, extends right to the western end of Karangahape Road. The hearings panel has recommended that final portion around about where the mobile service station is and where the resource consent application was declined is removed from the Karangahape Road precinct, and the precinct stops just before that last block of Karangahape Road. You are correct, Councillor Walker. Our case at the hearings was to leave the precinct as it is, but on reflection, looking at the recommendations from the panel as a whole, looking at the the fact that this would then go off to central government, the Minister for the Environment or Resource Management Reform, looking at the values present in that end of Quay Road, our view is that it is one that we should reject. The committee is able to, to accept that recommendation from
You
the
say
panel.
reject.
Accept that recommendation from the panel.
I'm
So-
certain you said reject.
The committee is able to reject it. There is evidence that you could rely on. You would have to provide the reasons by way of resolutions today. Clear resolutions, clear reasons why you would be rejecting it. Our advice is overall it's not something that we should, well, we're not recommending that you reject that recommendation.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair. I mean, what are we looking at in density versus retaining the integrity of the heritage in the area? Because that area also melds into heritage housing that's in the vicinity. So it's fairly contiguous. So, I mean, is this a significant issue as far as density is concerned?
With the increase in height limit under Plan Change 78 and supported by the Independent Hearings Panel, that achieves the density. The removal of the precinct from that block results in less emphasis being placed on a new building fitting in with the heritage character of the remainder of Karangahape Road. So the density is largely achieved as a result of Plan Change 78, increase in height from 15 to 35 in that block. It comes down to a design issue around the degree to which new buildings on that block should be reflecting the heritage character of the precinct as a whole. Under this recommendation, there would be less ability within the unitary plan to consider that. It doesn't vanish completely as a matter, but it is something that would be given less consideration in that block. And the panel has recommended that based on that block and the block opposite with the mobile service station really having no heritage values present immediately on the street front in that block.
Okay, I may come back to you on this, Mr. Chair, to think this through. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Turner.
Thank you. I find this about as complicated to follow as a wiring diagram on a Tesla. I need to understand yesterday's conversation, which we talked about view shafts, and I took a lot of note of those because they traverse all over the city. This is not connected to that. Even yesterday's workshop, this is not connected to that. Where's the connection there? That
Through the chair, we do have to be a bit careful in that the workshop yesterday was a confidential workshop, so there is only so much we can really discuss in the open forum here. We can say that the workshop yesterday was around a potential replacement for Plan Change 78 outside of the city centre, not in the city centre. Under that plan change, things like the view shafts are a matter that could be considered again, but today we're considering the recommendations for the view shafts and other aspects that cut across the city centre. There's a recommendation to retain the view shafts in the city centre. It may be through a future plan change that there could be some form of review, but at this point in time, we really need to focus on the city centre and the provisions there.
Okay, so my question still stands. I just want to make sure that what I'm saying yes to today doesn't come back and bite me in the arse at some stage later where you say, well, hang on, you said yes here and you... I
guess the context, Councillor Turner, through the workshops, and it is a bit hard. We've got the Plan Change 78 as a whole that's currently going through a hearing to try and change what we are doing with the wider plan change. One of the caveats the government gave us was that we wanted to, because we were halfway through it, to approve the city centre as a whole first, so under the current plan change. So when we go out for the next one, the city centre will be complete. We don't even have to, we can't talk about it again. The rest of the city is looked after, and then that goes to hearings. What the city centre portion that we're having today has already been through a hearings process, and we have two choices: to accept the recommendations or reject the recommendations. And what the staff are saying is largely the recommendations are in line with what we thought they were going to be. But it doesn't really connect to yesterday's conversation in a huge way.
So that's a no, it doesn't connect to any other conversations.
Just for clarity, because it was confidential for those who are listening, we are having some preparation workshops if we get the government change to allow us to do a new plan change, to get councillors up to date with what we may or may not have to do through that plan change process. The workshop yesterday was on a number of qualifying matters, and we did talk about view shafts. That is just giving councillors an idea, Councillor Turner, of what kind of policies could go forward and what evidence we'll need for that next plan change. This today is just on the city centre, which we won't be able to do in the next plan change anyway.
Okay, just one last question then. The qualifying matters are very small in number, and we have you know, all we have is qualifying matters that we can use to. The way I understood it when you explained it all to us was this NPSUD, the qualifying matters are the only controls council has over that, correct?
Not entirely correct. Qualifying matters are factors that the council can apply to have lower height limits and lower levels of density and intensity than the NPSUD would otherwise require. So the NPSUD says, for example, around the rapid transit stations within the walkable catchment, we must enable buildings of at least 6 stories. Now, the NPSUD also says if there is good reason not to allow 6 stories in certain locations, that has to be a qualifying matter, and the NPSUD talks quite clearly about what qualifying matters are. So it is a way of the NPSUD acknowledging that in some cases the starting point of, say, 6 stories or in the city centre unlimited height can be modified and reduced if there is a qualifying matter. And typically those are things that are matters of national significance under the Resource Management Act, outstanding landscapes, historic heritage, significant ecological areas and so on. Those are the sorts of things that the NPSUD clearly identifies as qualifying matters. It also allows the council to identify other matters that aren't necessarily of national significance as a good reason, but it has to be very carefully justified. So that's what a qualifying matter is.
I understand what a qualifying matter is. I'm trying to work out where they fit across the spectrum of all the things we've been asked to decide, and I was trying to do my homework last night and ended up with more questions than I started with. So we say yes to this, and qualifying matters could still affect it, that we're not locking in the qualifying matters into this point as well, are we?
As Chair has mentioned, only for the city centre. You're not locking in qualifying matters for the rest of the region. And if there was a plan change for the rest of the region, then you can look again at what qualifying matters should apply under that plan change. So you're not locking anything in other than for the city centre.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Darby.
Thanks. Just in summary, I've got a few questions here, but there are 37 recommendations, and the team have assessed all and are recommending all 37 in their totality to us for voting aye to.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Hey, look, we always miss a few things in workshops, and I'm just interested in looking at those recommendations in more detail. Can you just briefly, there's just been some changes on the building setbacks in the city centre, setbacks, outlook space, and tower dimensions. Can you just, I don't need a big, thorough urban design answer, but just give me a sense of the setback changes, the 6 metre and the 12 metre separation, the outlook space and the tower dimension. And also, I was encouraged to see new matters of discretion for through-site links, which is something that's really challenged us. If you could just briefly summarise that particular part as well.
Through the chair, I'll respond to this. So, in terms of, I'll just quickly run through a summary of the changes to built form standards between council's position and the recommendation. So, in our evidence, we recommended a maximum tower dimension standard of 50 metres. This already applies in the special height area. We recommended to retain that and to extend it to areas in the city centre zone where additional height was proposed. The IHP preferred submitters evidence which requested a maximum tower dimension of an average of 55 metres to enable larger floor plates. With regards to setbacks, an operative 6 metre setback already applies in the special height area. We recommended to extend that to areas where additional height was proposed and to introduce a variable 6% setback in the special height area to manage the effects of taller buildings. The IHP supported the 6 metre setback and its increased spatial extent, but did not support the variable setback, so they just want a standard 6 metres. With outlook space, the operative outlook space applies to residential developments, and the outlook space increases as the building gets higher. The IHP has recommended to reduce it to a standard 6 metre outlook in line with the minimum setback required. So those have been run past our experts and can be supported.
Got that, thank you. And the through site links? What's the new matter that's been introduced there?
So through site links under the operative plan are managed through the bonus provisions. So we recommended to delete the floor area ratio standards, which includes deleting the bonuses associated with that. So in our evidence, we had initially recommended through site links be managed as a standard through submit evidence and then through the hearing, and our evidence there, we came to the position of adding that as a matters of discretion and assessment criteria because it fits more appropriately with how those matters would be assessed in a development. So it's changed from being a requirement under a specific bonus to if someone does provide a through site link, then here are the assessment criteria and matters of discretion that they would be assessed under.
Okay, sorry, I'm not quite getting that. I know before it was about give us this, we'll give you that, effectively. And now it is been introduced as a new matter of discretion. So we've got a wider power to engage with the discussion or require a through site link. I just want to get a sense of, are we in a better position to actually require a through site link when we can identify the need for it?
No, there's no requirement. So this is matters to be considered if a development proposes a through site link, but there's no requirement anymore to provide them.
Leave that there. Just on view shafts at recommendation 16, Chair, I know we had a confidential discussion on that yesterday. I don't want to go there, but we've to date we've referred to these as volcanic view shafts. It's all over our plan as volcanic view shafts, and the recommendation is to change the language to maunga, and we now refer to it as maunga, which I totally accept. And there's a requirement there for special information requirements to be written up for D something or other, D, can't remember what it is, some particular section. So these recommendations, and accepting these recommendations today, and I'm assuming that there's going to be support for it, all of them, we actually do change the name throughout the plan, not just the city centre, to maunga view shafts, correct? Even though this is just the city centre section. And there is the staff will very quickly be developing these special information requirements.
Through the chair, Yes, the recommendation is to change the name of the overlay, and so it makes sense for that to be a change through the plan.
And right across the plan? Not just the city centre, but right across the plan?
Yes, but it doesn't have a substantive change in terms of rules. It's an identification.
Yeah, totally get that. And I note that there have been, the view shafts as they apply in the city centre have been retained, and there's been good evidence to support that. And there's just one tweak, and that's on some cranes and one particular view shaft. I think that's about it. And then there's a discussion about maunga to maunga, a view shaft as well. Can you just summarise the discussion there that the panel had on the importance of that maunga to maunga view shaft? Was that that was an existing view shaft, or are they talking about a new relationship? Maunga Fo, I think, to, what was it? I just can't remember. I have to look.
Through the chair, at the moment, there's views to specific maunga through the view shaft provisions. The unitary plan RPS also refers to the importance of views between the maunga. What the panel has said is that it recommends that the council investigate those new view shafts, but doesn't have the powers to recommend new view shafts in the context of views between them. In this context, although there is a special information requirement where there's an application for a resource consent to infringe the Auckland War Memorial view shaft, that's already at a certain height, and where there's potential for infringement of the views between Takarunga, Mount Victoria and Mangawhau, there is a suggestion that that be addressed in a resource consent application, but there's no new view shafts per se.
When you say it's a suggestion, did you say suggestion? It's not a recommendation. Sorry. It's not a recommendation, it's a suggestion, did you say?
It's a matter of discretion.
Matter of discretion. Sorry, I misheard you. Okay, got that. And the only other points, Chair, just at recommendations 35 and 36, there's the panel have referred to like brand names to identify locations, swashbucklers and the name of a building, and not addresses. I'm assuming that when we pick this up, we refer to them by addresses or titles, because I found that really hard to read and try and go to that site and get a sense of, it's that location. There's reference to the Orams building, there's reference to the Eke Panuku Western something or other, there's reference to the Auckland Harbour Board building. They are not in my eyes, they're not the appropriate ways to identify a property. I'm just saying, I'm assuming that you will be identifying them as either addresses or titles.
Through the chair, yes, they will be identified in most cases through the precinct plan maps. So that will be indicated on the maps in terms of specific heights, as is done in the operative plan.
Thank you. Mayor Brown.
Thank you. Definitely in support of the general thrust of this. Thank you. And but I can't quite get my head around why the K Road is not. It's at 72 metres. I mean, I just lived in a house in a building which was 60 metres in an area which is now going to be 72. And so it's almost a step back. I mean, with the whole point of this, if I understand, is to get more jobs and residents near these expensive railway thing we built, City Rail Link. And so you know, it doesn't go far enough, because the other part of it I'm asking is, if we opt out of MDRS and potentially lose 30% of our capacity, how much does this add back in? I know that it's not able to get it exactly right, because even in the MDRS, some of that new build would have been offices, not just houses. So there's a couple of questions. How do we get the K Road back up to where it's already breaches that?
So we're talking through the chair to the mayor.
There and amongst the yellow.
Yeah, so this is the recommendations from the panel, and it's the western block of Care Road that I mentioned before, Karangahape Road. So the green notation is where the height is proposed to increase from 15 metres to 35, which is roughly 8 stories.
There's already
also.
a 20-storey one right bang in the middle of that.
And then the yellow areas behind that western portion of Karangahape Road, heading down to the motorway and in the direction of Ponsonby Road, are 72.5 metres, roughly 18 stories. So it is just the frontage properties, it's not the entire block. Yep. So there is some increase to 72.5. The panel didn't hear compelling evidence in its view on the need to go beyond 35 on that frontage. I think that's about as much as we can say. So again, the committee, the council can at this point reject that and have an alternative of a high height in that green portion. We'd need to have clear reasons today in the resolutions and pointing at the specific evidence that that's relying on. And
I don't really want to reject anything of this, because if we reject any of it, the whole thing gets jammed up for a while, doesn't it? If we accept it, it becomes law tomorrow or something. Is that right? Have I got that wrong?
Very shortly, not tomorrow, but within the next week, I think
We have to try our best to get it done
6th
by
of
the
June.
30th.
So almost immediately, and it is a great improvement in the capacity. Have we got any particular ideas about how they go? And I mean, within those yellow and dark green areas, it's not all residential. It'll be mixed there, isn't it?
That's correct. And in terms of assessing the capacity, it's difficult when there's so much flexibility in the city centre to go office or residential. So there's some big assumptions you have to make. So the best figures that we have available are from the council's evidence at the hearings, which was, as Celia mentioned, there's roughly just under 4 million square metres of floor space in the city centre right now, roughly 4 million. The built, if you added all the floor space in the city centre right now, it's roughly 4 million. Under Plan Change 78 is notified, including the view shafts, it's roughly 16 million in plan-enabled capacity, 16 million. So that's a fourfold increase in what we see in the city centre right now as to what could be built under the notified version of the plan change. Now, what the panel has recommended would enable even more than that. We just haven't had the time to model what additional capacity would be available with the panel recommendations. It's not a massive increase from the panel, but the notified version of 78 had that 16 million in the evidence of Council's economist, Doug Fairgray.
Okay, well, that's all in the right direction, so I definitely support this, particularly noting that I'm the only person who lives in that area. So I think this is good. Okay?
And I guess just to the point, Mayor, just to your last point, Mayor, on the, oh, don't worry, Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The Mayor actually stole my question on K Road. Yeah, it is a bit of a weird one. We're building a mass transit station with the CRL, and many parts of that walkable area where you could see the station, there's still some of the most restrictive controls in housing in the city. So, you know, I'm wondering if, did the panel have anything to say about that? Was there any reasoning for that?
Well, the panel was supportive of the increase from the 15 metres in that western block up to 35. For the remainder of Karangahape Road to the core part of Karangahape Road, the panel was supportive of keeping the heights lower to avoid a mismatch between the volcanic view shafts that cut over parts of Karangahape Road and also the heritage character of the older buildings there, and felt that anything beyond the frontage being 35 and into the rear being 72 would compromise the heritage values of the core part of Karangahape Road.
Yeah, look, the special height area in particular is a really great improvement. Look, I'm just not quite sure why the recommendation was only for a small expansion of that special height area. You know, why not go further? And it kind of leads to my previous question, and actually capture areas that could be easily walked to with CRL stations, and not just the one on K Road to Waihoro to you as well. So was there a reason why that's small?
So to the north of the area, it's waterfront and all the sensitivities around high buildings in the waterfront area. To the west of the green area, you have the view shafts to the maunga. So to allow beyond 72.5 is sending mixed messages in the plan. On the one hand, we're saying the maunga, which go over that western yellow portion, are very important to the city, but on the other hand, we're suggesting the heights should be higher. So that's to the west of the core green area, which has the unlimited height. To the south, you are coming towards Karangahape Road, Myers Park, and some of the sensitivities there. So generally, the team felt, and the panel has agreed, that going up to 72.5 from where we are now, which is 50 metres or less, is a significant step forward in terms of enabling more capacity. It aligns the yellow area around the core of the city centre with the 10 metropolitan centres, which also have that 72.5 metre height limit. But yeah, there is the sensitivity around Karangahape Road as you get closer to that area. To the east, concerns about potential impacts on the strong cluster of heritage buildings around O'Connell Street, High Street and so on. And so again, pushing things up to 72.5 was considered to be an appropriate increase without compromising that. And then I guess also to the east and southeast, you're moving into the learning quarter, the Albert Park, and potential impacts on those. I guess through the process, there was an opportunity for submitters to come in with strong evidence in support of further increases beyond the 72.5 and expanding that dark green area with the unlimited height. But the panel was not convinced that there was a compelling case or compelling evidence as to the need for that. And in terms, again, of overall capacity, the panel was not convinced that the restrictions were impeding overall development opportunities in the city centre at all. When you look at demand over the next 30 years and beyond relative to that significant increase in capacity, the conclusion supported the council's economic evidence that there would be minimal or no difference in what would actually be built in the city centre.
Thank you. Just got two more, Chair, thanks. Yeah, I think the central tension there, and I think you've alluded to in your answer, is whether, this is undoubtedly a step forward, not arguing that, right? But whether this is our one shot to actually nail it, or whether we're comfortable with steady progression forwards. So I suppose on that note, I am a little bit confused, and I wonder if there's any kind of evidentiary or legal basis for it. Why was 72.5 the number chosen? I mean, what's the harm in 80 or 90 or 100? Why that specific number?
So, through the chair, so the 72.5 metres is the operative metropolitan height. Sorry.
If you just move the mic closer to you. Thanks so much, Elizabeth.
The 72.5 metres is the metropolitan height. So we did have existing, evidence that it was a height that we understood sort of the effects of in terms of the height of those buildings. And there was no evidence provided by submitters around a specific height greater than that. So there was evidence around submissions and evidence around unlimited, but no evidence, no one else came in with any other height proposed. So we had to go with the height that we had some basis for, and that was the 72.5.
It's kind of a carry forward from the previous work, eh? Is that fair?
It was based on the information available and the evidence available from our urban design experts.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I do find it a bit strange that in a city centre environment we would stop someone building 80 or 90, but look, I'll save that for comment. I've just got one last question. Just at a broad level, we're required through this to, quote, enable building heights and density of urban form to realise as much development capacity as possible to maximise the benefits of intensification. That's what we're required in our policy. Does this recommendation meet that to the best of our ability?
Yeah, well, I'd just like to pull a statement from Council's economic evidence that really hones in on this issue of capacity, demand and so on, and was supported by the panel as the preferred evidence that the panel heard on the whole issue of capacity, demand, city centre. So we've got this evidence. This is from our expert, Dr. Doug Fairgray, who looks at capacity demand from an economic perspective. So his conclusion was the benefits of economic growth and development would not be less under Plan Change 78 with these sorts of restrictions and others than an unlimited approach with no constraint on height in the city centre at all. So effectively what he's saying is with these sort of constraints and the view shafts and other restrictions to allow sunlight into open space, the development would not be, economic growth and development would not be less under PC 78 than unlimited approach to Policy 3A, which you read out. Another quote, would not have a material opportunity cost by having these restrictions. So that's some of the key conclusions there, but I think the upshot is that the panel quite clearly states in its recommendations that it prefers this economic evidence to other evidence that it heard.
I find that a little strange, but I might come back to that and comment. Thanks,
Right.
Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Just while we're on that, and I guess this is part of the 4D chess of this process, because I had similar concerns to Councillor Henderson, but largely this is because of the heights we put in 2022 as starting points around that. Like, for Councillor Henderson, that would have been our opportunity then to ask for 100 metres, etc., around the, not the special height, the general height.
Yeah, that's largely the shift. It's paragraph 86 of the panel's recommendations that really captures this as well. If I can just very quickly read that evidence too, because this is a really important matter. So the panel prefers Dr. Fairgray's economic evidence that the overall quantum of development in the city centre provided by Plan Change 78 is notified, accommodating the various qualifying matters, would be the same as an unlimited Policy 3 approach, even though the pattern of development in the city centre might be different if we had no control over development whatsoever, and that the identification of qualifying matters results in a net benefit as opposed to an economic cost. So I think that's quite compelling, and that's from the panel's recommendations that you have before you.
But I guess I did have some confusion on that. What does that actually mean? How could that be possible?
It means that even with these restrictions in place, the amount of overall development over the next 20, 30 years in the city centre would be the same as if we had no restrictions in place. That's my simple sort of summary of it. That even with these restrictions in place, there is so much potential for development in the city centre under this plan change that in the short, medium, long term, the amount of development that we'll see in the city centre is not going to be constrained. It may happen in different places than if it was unlimited. It may be that if we had no 72.5 metre restriction in the yellow areas, we might see some taller towers in that area. So it may push the intensity to the green area and other areas, but overall, the city centre as a whole, the amount of development with no restrictions, as supported by the panel, will be the same as with the restrictions that the panel has put forward. And that's because of the headroom, the amount of capacity that this plan change is providing relative to estimated demands over the short, medium and long term.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Walker.
Just coming back to that question I raised earlier around retaining some of the significant historic buildings, and these are in that location that's, you know, in the vicinity of Newton Road. And my question goes like this: I mean, is it not possible to retain those buildings that are part of a larger block and still have the height? I mean, they're not mutually exclusive, are they?
So, Councillor Walker, just to clarify, we're referring to that western portion of Karangahape Road again?
Yes, yes. So I'm referring to the evidence by Ms. Walker, no relation as far as I know. And I mean, we're talking about the two significant historic buildings that face Newton Road. These have an important relationship with K Road and form the gateway entrance to the precinct as you approach from Newton Road. The block form part of the ridgetop location, orientation and aspect of the K Road precinct. While the building at 538 K Road has been demolished and that site is currently vacant, and the service station located opposite 555 does not contribute to the precinct's built form or streetscape building, the buildings on 582 K Road do contribute to the character of K Road. So that's the location that I'm focused on. And my question is, can we still retain them but also have the height? I mean, they're not mutually exclusive, are they?
No, they're not mutually exclusive. The panel has recommended that the historic heritage overlay still applies to that block. So they have recommended that the Karangahape precinct stops short of that block with the sites that you refer to, but that the historic heritage area would still continue right to the end of it. So, as I mentioned before, there is still an ability to take into account the relationship between new buildings in that block and the heritage values of Karangahape Road. The panel has simply recommended that the precinct is pulled back to recognise the difference in the qualities of that block relative to the remainder of the precinct. So there is still some ability to assess impacts on historic heritage for new buildings in that area.
Just to clarify, what's the difference with the retention of the precinct in the area as it goes to height?
The precinct doesn't govern the height. It's this height plan here that governs the height. So the removal of the precinct has no bearing on the height. This map here, as recommended by the panel, would go into the unitary plan, and it sets out the increase in height for that western block from 15 metres up to the light green 35 metres.
Okay, so just to clarify then, if we can retain the heritage and we could retain the precinct and it doesn't have an impact on the height, and I'm working off the evidence that I've got, why wouldn't we do that?
Well, on balance, we feel that it's not adding a huge amount of value. It would then have to go to the Minister to make a decision, so it would hold up the decision-making on that portion of Karangahape Road. But again, as I mentioned before, that is an option available to the committee if you felt that the precinct should go right to the end of Karangahape Road and shouldn't be removed off that last block, then you could make that decision. There is evidence to support that decision. It would then go to Minister Bishop to make a decision as to whether it stays or is removed. Sure. And on balance, we feel it's a better process to make the decision in line with the panel's recommendations.
So my further question is, if it's not making a difference in terms of height, is the Minister going to be concerned?
can't
Don't
answer
think
to that.
that's a question.
Can't
for
second
John.
guess that. My concern is that wherever possible, we should be endeavouring to retain heritage, and this is a really important area, and it relates to the balance of K Road.
That's probably a debating point, so we'll just,
Hey,
yeah.
Okay, so I may well put an amendment up, Mr. Chair. I don't think this is a biggie.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor, I'll go to councillor Lee first. He hasn't asked a question.
Just coming back to the K Road matter, we are in a post unitary plan world where significant deregulation and significant potential capacity was made free, essentially at the behest of the central government. So here we are, we have another round, and the idea is to further deregulate, and the stated objective is to have more people living in the central city, which I don't think anyone would disagree with. However, we're obliged to make these decisions not at the behest of a minister that may come and go. We've seen them all come and go. But what we're required to do under the law, which is the Resource Management Act. Now, even under the present legislation, and the Resource Management Act doesn't say matters of national importance, increased capacity in the Auckland city centre, increased capacity all over Auckland, housing capacity all over Auckland. That is not the law. The law requires us to, under Section 5 and Section 6 of the RMA, to make decisions within a certain framework of sustainable management of natural and physical resources. And so therefore this total focus on one aspect or an aspect, as if that's going to solve problems, I think is a failure. So just remind us, in terms of the current legislation, historic heritage is a qualifying matter, is it not?
Through the Chair, that's correct. Historic heritage is a qualifying matter, and within the city centre there are many individual sites and areas, particularly in terms of Karangahape Road, that are identified as historic heritage, and the panel has supported the retention of all of the historic heritage places and the Karangahape Road historic heritage area. So there's nothing from the panel that is suggesting that historic heritage should be removed as a qualifying matter for the benefit of more intensification.
Just the other aspect, in terms of historic heritage, there are also overlays, and I assume that is to retain or conserve aesthetic coherence, which is another RMA word or concept. By breaking these things up, again, we're going down a track which is not in any way integrated or sustainable under the Act. So I just have real concerns about the total focus of certain ministers that come in and then leave, about increasing capacity for really at the behest of the Property Council. And so do you not think that good planning, good town planning must adhere to as much as possible to what is required under the current legislation? You know, we've had, we're going to have new legislation, we're going to get rid of RMA, we're going to have a national policy statement. All these national policy statements are an instrument of the current legislation, not the other way around. So do you not see there is a danger of us taking a completely unbalanced approach to planning in Auckland?
That's quite a lot for this meeting, Councillor Lee, and probably some debating points. John, if you could... No. Well, John might be able to give some why we're here and what we have to...
I think the short answer is you're absolutely correct, Councillor Lee, that the National Policy Statement Urban Development must be consistent with the RMA. It's an instrument of the RMA. It's produced under the Resource Management Act. In the hierarchy, it sits below the RMA. But that's really as far as I can probably take it. That's, what we're looking to do, recommending today, we would say is in line with the National Policy Statement, which is the requirement that we have on us as council, but the NPS itself has to be consistent with the RMA.
I just make the point that the current minister and the previous one, previous one I would consider a friend, seem to have the assumption that a national policy statement that they promulgate overrides RMA, and of course it doesn't. It's an instrument of RMA, just like a district plan is.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Turner and then Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you. I'll be quick because it's kind of Councillor Lee's done a much better job on what I was thinking about. So we've got 4 million square metres of floor space built in this area now, correct? How much potential is there left under the law that stands at the moment? Not, you know, how much, you know, because this is going to bring in, you said, the ability to do 16 million square metres. Correct. What's the standard? What's the capacity that we can go to at the moment?
Through Chair, unfortunately, we haven't modelled the capacity of the plan as it stands. We have what Plan Change 78 will enable, and we have what's already built. With the missing piece is what the unitary plan already allows. But I think what we can say is that the Plan Change 78, as recommended by the panel, is significantly more than what the unitary plan allows. But we just don't have that. What do we currently allow? It's mainly through these increases in height in the yellow area up to the 72.5, which is currently 50 metres or less in some areas. The removal of the overall restriction on floor space on a site-by-site basis, that floor area ratio control.
You want to just explain
those two combined? The floor area ratio control says if your site is 1,000 square metres, you may be allowed 10 times that, so 10,000. So that, with the removal of that control, there is an opportunity for far more intensity of development with the increases in height. So we know it's a big increase, we just can't quantify the difference.
So a lot of the public would say that that the expansion of the policy statement, the national policy statement on urban development, that's increased the capacity in Auckland so hugely, allowed cherry picking by the developers that has affected sort of spot places which they didn't expect to be affected. This is a huge jump in capacity between 4 million and 16 million. Have we got enough rules in here to make sure that council can control the development so that it's not ad hoc?
So all new buildings require a resource consent that can theoretically be declined, and there is a design assessment of every new building in the city centre. There are also a number of controls around ensuring that there is sufficient outlook from residential apartment buildings, that there is setbacks at certain height levels to make sure that new buildings fit into the context within the different precincts of the city centre, because as we know, Britomart is a very different place to around the town hall here, which is very different to Wynyard Quarter, which is different to the university. So there are controls in Plan Change 78 that deal with some of those subtle differences, but I think the key thing is that every new building still requires a resource consent that will still have a design assessment against the objectives of the plan.
All right, thank you. Boy, some people in Green Bay would love to have some setbacks. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. Planning is very complex, so I just want to be very clear about what we're doing today. We are having a process to look at the IHP recommendations, which is discrete and separate to the workshops and all of the other material that we've been doing, some of which some of us have some real concerns about. But in terms of what we're doing today, it's been made clear, and I just want confirmation from the officers, that we will have a second bite at the cherry when we're looking at capacity enabling for that next stage. So for those who are concerned whether or not K Road and other areas, they will have that opportunity at that next point in time. The one thing, and I'd like confirmation of that, because I think it is complex, and particularly where governments are talking about major changes to RMA and everything else, and we're all trying to pull all the strands together. But for the purpose of this council, as a creature of statute, we are responding to the IHP's recommendations today, and we either accept or reject. So I'm working from that assumption, and I will support it on the basis of that assumption. What I want to understand in the hierarchy of things, though, is on coastal inundation and flooding, you are telling us that we will need to wait for the natural hazards work, and I'm just trying to understand what trumps what, because I still have some real concerns about coastal inundation and the waterfront area and so forth. So can you speak to that for me and help me better understand where that is going to sit in the hierarchy of decision making?
Thank you. Through the chair, probably a few questions there, so apologies if I don't capture them all, respond to them all. And so in terms of the first question around, will there be another opportunity to relook at this through a potential plan change for the rest of the city? The answer is no. Decisions today effectively would lock in the city centre provisions really until there's a plan review of the unitary plan as a whole, which may be 2, 3, 4 years ago. It's scheduled to commence as early as next year. So city centre is locked in.
Can you just pause on that point so that other body of work on further intensification will not enable the concerns being expressed by the Mayor and I think Councillor Henderson, but it will come through the unitary plan process, which is a couple of years away. I just want everyone to be quite clear about this.
That really is the more appropriate process. We haven't seen the legislation yet in terms of potentially allowing the council to remove the remainder of Plan Change 78 outside the city centre. So it potentially comes down to the way that legislation is written. But our working assumption is that the city centre aspects would be dealt with for now and would have to wait to the full unitary plan review. So everything inside that red boundary there would be locked in until full plan review. Everything outside of that, if the legislation heads the way that the council has been seeking, would be subject to another plan change, and the opportunity to submit on that will be available, but not for the city centre. That's our assumption. But the caveat is we haven't seen the legislation yet. We don't know absolutely, but that is our working assumption, that decisions today would lock in the city centre until a full plan review.
Okay, I really appreciate you making that clear in terms of all of those options that are available to us, unless we go down the track of Christchurch, which basically told, you know, they went alone, did they not, in terms of just rejecting processes. But that's for a further discussion, perhaps. But can you come to the issue of coastal inundation and flooding and where this will sit moving forward, and the work on natural hazards that is being undertaken by yourselves and others?
So Diana has given me a bit of a qualifier to what I said previously. If there are some specific issues, in particular natural hazards, where the approach in the city centre, or we need some enhanced, strengthened provisions for natural hazards in the city centre, then a discrete issue like that could be part of a plan change that could extend into the city centre. So the broad issues of capacity, intensification, qualifying matters for the city centre, our assumption is they will be dealt with and couldn't really be revisited until full plan review. But if there is a specific matter such as tougher restrictions on hazards, then that is something through a subsequent plan change for the region could have some provisions that apply in the city centre as well. So there is that caveat that for the
Can you
constant-
understand that that is actually quite frustrating in terms of understanding definitions of could or should? This gets into some really fine areas of planning that I don't want to later feel that we have in any way been misled, not by yourselves, but just because of the complexity of the legislation that we're dealing with.
I accept that, and I think a large part comes down to we haven't seen the legislation yet. I think it's a reasonable assumption, and it's probably a good suggestion that we see this as effectively locking in the bulk of the planning for the city centre, with some potential exceptions for things like hazards, where through a subsequent plan change there may be some controls that apply across the city, including the city centre, that would come into play through a subsequent plan change.
Yes, and I'll see if we can get some information again, Councillor Fletcher, from Phil, because I remember in the early discussions on the hazards plan change, they felt that the controls through resource consent in the city centre were already strong enough to be dealing. Oh, there he is. The reason, I don't know if Phil's. Phil, the reason why we felt city centre was, my memory is that you felt resource consent and current controls such as the Key Street seawall and things we're building already are already dealing with some of those things in the city centre, which is why we progressed it.
That's right. Through the evidence that we gave in the city centre, we looked to use our experts, which we're also using through the preparation work that we're doing for the natural hazards plan change. We're using the best of our understanding at that time and setting those controls within those precincts. The open workshops that we've been doing on the natural hazards work itself has had a residential zone focus to it. And so on the topic of inundation, we've looked specifically at situations where we would be down zoning for residentially zoned land, not for other zones.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Filipina.
Chair, I just want to have a process question to you.
Please, yeah.
How are you going to manage if there are any amendments to reject some of what the the Independent Hearings Panel, has put forward to us? I just wanted to find that process before I ask any of the partai that I have.
Kia ora, Councillor. So I'll go to Megan if I'm not getting it right, but how I feel we should take it is if there are amendments, we might take a break after these sets of questions. I know Councillor Walker has potential one. I think what we will do is make sure the wording is correct from an officer point of view, and then I might go through a one-by-one question. So there might be a bit of a yo-yo if there's more than one amendment. The staff can come forward, answer questions on the specifics of rejecting. Then we will debate that amendment, win or lose, and then it's slightly out of normal standing orders, but then if there's another one, I'd like to go through the same process so we get the information, so questions and debate again, and then we'll debate the substantive, if that's right, if that sounds okay.
Kia ora. So I will ask my partai then. Morena koutou team. Look, the question I have is that the first one, and that's just to confirm that there's no right of appeal under the RMA against the council's decision on the IHP recommendations.
No, there isn't. Yeah.
The process, if there is any amendments to reject, that process is that we will end up having to have the recommendation and provide alternative recommendations to the minister for him or her to make, I don't know who the minister is, for them to make the decision on any that we reject.
Yeah, that's correct.
And it has to be aligned with evidence already put before the hearings panel.
That's correct.
Can you also tell me approximately how much of our submission to the hearings panel was accepted by the hearings panel?
Most of our evidence was accepted.
Okay then. No, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Newman.
Phil might just want to make his way back up front here because I do have a follow-up question from what Councillor Fletcher was talking about. But a brief comment from me, Chair, just because I won't speak later. But I mean, it's a bit a binary question on whether to accept or reject an IHP recommendation, for which I'll be accepting it because there is no reason not to. And if there is a reason not to, it would have to be defensible, which it is not. So that's why it's a perfectly rational thing to accept these recommendations, and I will be doing that. My question, though, just following on from what Councillor Fletcher talked about with the coastal inundation and the coastal edge and the subsequent plan change work that does need to take place, it has always struck me how we've actually been able to defend a lower level of intensification in the North Shore, north of the bridge, right around the coastal edge of the North Shore, but in every other part of the Auckland region, we go, in many places, hard right up to the very edge, including in here, but we go right to the very edge. So I do support subsequent plan changes to be consistent across the region where there is evidence, and there is. I'm assuming that in some of the lower edges of the CBD, that there would be challenges with respect to inundation, which may lead us to require an inclusion with respect to a subsequent plan change to address some of that. Is that your expectation?
Yeah, as was mentioned earlier, what we do need to do is actually look at where we land as our final set of provisions for the natural hazard strengthening in the unitary plan, and consider them back against these recommended changes for the central area. We've then got choice around whether or not those differences are such that we do need to actually get back in on some of those central city provisions and amend them, or wait until we do it in a more comprehensive way through the review of the unitary plan. Yeah, there are choices there for us.
Do you have a sense at this stage as to what your recommendation would be on timing?
My sense is that the central city presents a number of different circumstances to other areas, both in terms of the existing built form, the opportunities for change that are there, and so whilst we've got approaches that we're taking for residential areas, for instance, which are differentiated and we're looking to align them, I think the approach that we take for the central area needs to be looked at very carefully before we make that type of call around whether there are further changes which need to happen to these provisions today.
Thanks, Councillor. Maybe Phil, I remember our discussion around Ports of Auckland and Westhaven and things. Is it part of the reason it wouldn't be included in the hazards plan change because of, and why it's different in residential, is due to the height of the current, I think it's 100 years the ports believe they are safe, and Quay Street, but also the level of investment we'd be likely to do in somewhere like the city centre rather than every other suburb in the city. There's like a bit of a, I think Paul Kleinak might have commented on this too.
Yeah, and so questions around reasonable use, the types of intensity which are provided in the city centre and how that in turn provides more options for how land can be used. They're all factors that differentiate it from other parts of the region.
Thank you. Looks like we have, Councillor Watson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And not quite directly related to the matter of hand, but I don't know if you'll be able to help me or not. So we're dealing with the recommendations today to do with increase in density and height and all the rest of it. We did have reference in one of the many workshops to do with that report that came out in terms of life in medium density housing, and there are a couple of pockets of medium density in this zone, I think, up around Hopeland Street. I'm not sure. I mean, medium density can go up to 6 stories, so I think it is. But irrespective, I imagine this applies to apartments as well, where we had our own research. you know, pointed to a number of concerns in respect of the, you know, the average size of homes, inadequate storage, lounges smaller than best practice, etc., etc. Where is that? Where and when is that work going to get picked up? Because obviously, as we make these decisions, we're increasing the stock of this higher intensity housing, and our own report shows that there are some pretty serious reservations with the way that's evolving on the ground, and you know, it's Aucklanders who are going to live in this accommodation. So just a general question, not strictly apropos today, but really it is important by association.
Thank you. Through the chair, as you may recall, and it relates to the discussion around natural hazards, one of the limitations on what Plan Change 78 could do is that it can't have any new restrictions. It has to be enabling more. And that was that section 80E of the RMA that you might have heard about. We can't introduce anything new. So there's nothing in Plan Change 78 that actually introduces new requirements around indoor living, size of indoor living areas, those other factors that you mentioned, Councillor Watson. So there's nothing in Plan Change 78, and there couldn't be, it wasn't allowed. It was a plan change that was required to be allowing more development, not addressing any existing issues. So those matters would have to be addressed through a subsequent plan change. As we've talked about, that subsequent plan change for the rest of the region probably couldn't deal with the city centre. I think one of the key things we need to bear in mind for those sort of controls that you're talking about is that there are strong signals from government about changes to the RMA to reduce the ability of councils to deal with them. So it's a sort of moving target. We have to watch that space as well. But certainly for the rest of the region, for medium density through the potential replacement plan change for the rest of 78, those improving the overall quality of development will be a factor of will be something that we could apply in the new plan change. It just wouldn't be able to apply to the city centre. That would have to be dealt with at a later date. Yeah.
Thank you. Right. I think we have got there on the questions. I don't think there are many opportunities for, I don't think there are many rejections coming, but there is at least one amendment. But please, if you have another amendment, let's just break for 10 minutes and we'll just make sure that anything shaking out is appropriate or I guess legal, and then we'll have some questions on them. But if that's cool, if you could bring your amendment to myself, Megan and Phoebe, and we will work to put that forward, and please have a seconder for that as well. Cool. So staff will just let you step back for 10 minutes. Thank you. Moving back to the table. Okay, if I can have the staff back to the table. Getting it. Councillor Walker, I'm just going to have you come and did you have a seconder, do you? Cool. I'll just have you explain I'll get staff come back to the table.
Councillor Lee's going to lead off and I'll follow.
Okay, so it's moved by Councillor Lee?
No, it doesn't matter who speaks to it.
Yeah, it does.
Well, yeah, it does. If it's your amendment, you have to speak to it first.
Oh, Mike, we'll just swap it around.
Okay, so
So Councillor Lee is moving and not Councillor Walker? Okay. Okay, Councillor Lee, if you just want to describe the amendment and then we'll go to...
Is it up there?
It's been sent around to everyone.
So it's not up there.
It is up there though. If you just want to describe it and then we'll just have an opportunity for questions, Councillor Lee, just so people know what they're voting for or against.
Okay, I wish to speak in support, Mr. Chair. The arguments are pretty well known now. The council's expert evidence argues against this, and pressure has been brought to bear, and we're changing our position. Okay, these things happen. However, in terms of K Road and its unique culture and unique environment, again, we are missing out on the Part 2 requirements of the Resource Management Act on the basis that any building is something that we should support. It should have priority over virtually everything else. But the K Road and its historic heritage overlay, historic heritage area reflects the uniqueness of that part of town, historic part of town. And if we're talking about, well, it's going to create jobs, okay, and by destroying that, well, removing that part of the heritage overlay, we just lost over 100 jobs just down the road a few metres, mainly, I think, due to council's policy, mainly the forever construction that's going on, mainly the removal of short-term parking, loading zones and all the rest of it. We'll leave that aside. If it is to create jobs, well, there are plenty of places in that area that are not within the historic heritage overlay that are just as close to the proposed or the City Rail railway station that could easily cater for a building of that size if it was considered acceptable. So essentially, I'm saying we should hold the line, stand up to the vested interests. They talk about intensification activity at all. So let's hold the line, Mr. Chairman. So I fully support this. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor Lee. Thank you. Now, as I said to Councillor Filipina, I'm going to sort of semi-suspend normal debate just to make sure we can do or are doing something that's legal. I guess the first two questions from me, and then I'll open to questions to others, is could maybe if you describe why the AHP chose to change the recommendation, and what are the implications of this amendment if it was passed? If that's, I guess, the implications of the process more, not what might be decided.
So the best reference is to paragraph 464 of the panel's recommendations. So the amendment is referring to 465 from the panel, and also a reference to council's evidence at 461. The key paragraph in between those two is paragraph 464. It's short, it's one sentence, so I'll read that out. The panel, following the site visit, is not satisfied that the distinctive built form and streetscape character, in inverted commas, of Karangahape Road Precinct extends to the block in question. And we do not consider that the block aligns well with the precinct description in Plan Change 78, especially when considering the requirements of the NPSUD. So that's...
I'm really sorry to interrupt staff, but I think the least we can do if you're putting up an amendment is actually give some respect to the staff to not talk while they're trying to tell the rest of us the answer.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, cool. That's not fair, I think, Councillor Lee. I think Councillor Ferry was making a point to make sure we were making legally sound decisions. Cool.
Well, that's the conclusion. That's the best I can offer to you, Chair, in response to your question, is that the panel's key reason is given on the basis of a site visit and not being satisfied that the particular block in question does have the distinctive built form and character of the rest of Karangahape Road, and therefore doesn't meet the description of the Karangahape Road precinct as a whole, and has recommended that the precinct is removed from that block for the reasons at paragraph 464.
And from your knowledge, what is on the site in question?
Well, the block has more modern buildings than the remainder of the buildings on Karangahape Road, obviously. Yeah. On the street frontage, there are heritage buildings. The Dog's Bollocks building is a historic heritage building at the rear, and that is a historic heritage place in the unitary plan. The panel is not recommending that that heritage notation is removed, and as I mentioned before, the panel is recommending that the heritage area as a whole is retained, but in terms of where the precinct would stop, they are recommending it stops before that block.
So the Dog's Bollocks is still protected?
Still protected.
Okay. Something I haven't asked before in this meeting. And what are the implications if this goes ahead? What happens from here? If you could just repeat that.
Well, if the committee accepted this amendment, as we've mentioned before, it would then, the matter will be referred to Minister for Environment or Resource Management Reform. Sorry, Diana, can you clarify which minister? Anyway, to government, to minister, for a decision to either accept this alternative or support the panel's recommendation to remove the precinct. In practice, what it means is no change to the height controls. It just means that some of the assessment matters for a new building in that block would fall away if the precinct doesn't extend right to the end of Karangahape Road.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, you've got some questions?
Thank you. A couple of questions. First question is, if we voted for this, does this mean the decision maker in this would be the minister or the government as opposed to us?
We're pretty certain it's Minister Bishop as the Minister for Resource Management Reform. I think the legislation refers to the Minister for the Environment, which is not Minister Bishop. However, the advice that we've received from government officials is that it is a matter that Minister Bishop would decide.
Maybe I'll ask my question. I'm not asking for a named minister. I'm saying that if we voted for this, the decision would be removed from our hands and being given to central government to make the final recommendation.
Can I just be really clear, just on this particular matter, so not the rest of it?
Yeah, that's what I meant. Thank you. And my second question is, how much of this block is actually not built on at all anyway? I don't know a lot about K Road, I'll be honest, but there's isn't there quite a bit of car park open space anyway?
We're just checking that. I think it's entirely built on. It's, I don't think this encompasses the vacant, there is a vacant site at the moment. I think it's the block next to that, but we're just checking that on the, that's correct. So the vacant site would still stay within the precinct, which has car parking on it, but the last block right up to Newton Road, Ponsonby Road would be removed from the precinct.
Thank you.
Is it at all possible for us to get a map up that shows exactly which block this is? I think that would be really helpful for people's understanding and debate.
Yes, though they're available somewhere if we.
Mr. Chair, just in terms of the street layout, the IHP's recommendation with showing the block to be removed has been provided as a additional PowerPoint, which I believe can be put up.
Phoebe and Duncan are just getting that up.
Yeah.
The Mayor would like to just make.
I might be able to clarify that. I know that block quite well. Currently, the bit where the what's the name of the company going to build that? Kirkpatrick want to build is an empty site that used to be occupied by Torpedo 7 but was pulled down about a year ago. And the rest of the block is Ponsonby doctors who are my family physician. And next to that, on the top floor, is Brown and Thompson Consulting Engineers who have coming up towards 50 years. And that is so that they're a historic company, but they don't particularly feel that it's a historic building. So in fact, we are talking about an empty site, which is where Kirkpatrick built, and a very plain building next door, which is a doctor downstairs and engineering upstairs. And there's nothing remotely historic about that. The other side of the road has some historic buildings, cafes and things. But I mean, if this is historic, then I will be moving to have limitless heights on Waiheke and Whangaparoa.
We just maybe stick to the specifics. We're just going to try and get, because I know the site well, but maybe others don't, but we're just going to get a Google Street View situation going on.
May I speak to it in the interim, Mr. Chair?
4 Gundry Street is probably a good place to start, and then we can walk around the whole block. So if you can see that hatched area, that is the bit that is being spoken about.
Yeah, the dog's bollocks is in the...
Yeah, so if you want to go up the street.
Okay, it's an Irish...
So it's on the left there. So we're talking about that block. That's correct, Elizabeth?
Yes, that's correct.
But that is
So
the,
apologies
maybe
if it's
stop
a
there.
vacant
That
site
is
now.
the site. And maybe if you go up onto Karangahape Road and round the corner a bit, Phoebe?
No. The idea of, well, I'll speak to this at the appropriate time.
So we're just making sure people know where. And if you go forward a little bit more, Phoebe,
Yeah.
sorry.
And
then
my
turn
apologies,
around.
the site is now vacant. That shows how long it's been since I've been up there.
Yeah.
So
Well, no.
it is vacant.
It's
the other
actually
way.
so that we have development on the site. that's
If you go along
consistent
the
with
street a bit.
heritage nature of the area.
And turn. That is the
Not stopping some
site.
development.
And then the end of the corner
the
as
nature
well.
of what development takes place.
Yeah. Okay. So there are questions, Councillor Walker, or you? We'll wait till debate if you're going to debate. But if you have a question on this,
I don't have a question.
Okay.
I was just going to...
Cool. Once I asked at Councillor Lee to open so we could do questions.
Sure.
Once questions are complete, we'll go to debate. Councillor Ferry, question.
Thank you. So further to the Deputy Mayor's question about this if we reject this, it goes to the minister. Are we aware if the minister has made any public comments that suggest how they might approach this site?
I'll handle that through the chair. Yes, there has been media reports in relation to the resource consent for the Fitzpatrick site, Kirkpatrick site, if we just call it that. And in those media reports that you can see online, the minister believes that the decision of our hearings panel, not the same one we're talking about now, but the hearings panel for that resource consent was not a good decision, and that he saw no reason why there couldn't be a development on the site.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. I'm just hoping we can kind of define the issue a little bit clearer. So we've got a gravel pit there. We've got a modern building, which is road frontage to K Road. But then we've got the Dogs Bollocks site, which is frontage to Newton Road, all on the same site, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, that same parcel, sorry. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that seems to be the issue that the amendment is driving at. The Dogs Bollocks site, is that heritage listed?
That is correct. It would remain heritage listed under the panel's recommendations.
Okay, I'm much clearer. Thank you. I hope everyone else is. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I think we've exhausted questions, so I'll get staff to move back from. So we've already entered you into a little bit of the debate, but hopefully no more. So right now, so we've had Councillor Leeds spoken on the amendment. Now we'll go to Councillor Walker, who would like to speak on the amendment, and I'm sure there may be.
I'll just speak to this briefly, Mr. Chair, and then, frankly, can we just put it to the vote? The reason that I support this is we do have an area that has heritage over the road. You saw the buildings down K Road, and on the corner, you've got heritage leading up to it. It's part of a heritage precinct. There was evidence, expert evidence on the part of council officers to support retaining it. So we have expert evidence to hang our hat on, and I'm at odds with the point of view of the independent commissioners. There is no issue about construction on the site and buildings on the site, but like a number of locations in Auckland, the purpose is to have buildings that reflect the overall heritage character of the precinct. That's the purpose of having the precinct. So that's why the amendment. So can we put it to the vote, please? I have a funeral to go to.
No, we're going to the debate. The Mayor would like to speak next.
Yeah, I want to speak to this. I mean, I'm a person who owns historic listed buildings, so it's not like I'm against them. But to vote to have an empty site turned into a historic building is to demean the value of historic buildings. And so you are actively working against preservation if you vote for this. This is just stupidity. That if you looked around there's historic buildings on the other side of the road, and it's good, no one's questioning those, but this is an empty site with a plain building next door which my staff occupy. And I think, as I say, if this is it, I'm moving that we have unlimited heights in Waiheke and Whangwhangapara. If we don't respect people who live in the city, then and who treasure old buildings, then we're just making a mockery of ourselves. We're just handing over to Wellington decisions. And that's another thing I don't like. I've been fighting that Auckland make decisions about Auckland. And we can't make stupid decisions about Auckland, otherwise we will look even more stupid than we already do. So I couldn't be more against this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I think the Mayor is spot on, and I just sort of add that this site is 600 metres walk away from the new railway station. That is a multi-billion-dollar investment, and I suggest that we might want to take advantage of that. Look, we've got three things on this parcel. We've got a heritage building, which will be unaffected by the amendment either way, and should be protected, and it will be. We've got a modern building, presumably that's not affected either. So we're left with what would amount to, if this passes, a heritage gravel pit. And that is nonsense. And so I'll be voting against this amendment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. There are no other speakers, so just briefly from me too, I could not in all good conscience support this. I have asked for a lot of advice to see if we could reject the other some of the other restrictions around the height. Yes, we've will increase some of this area from 15 and 30 to 72, and that's great, but we are needing more intensification around these stations, and this is limited. I think this is one way that we can see more development, and also to points that have been made, to continue a precinct that covers empty sites and buildings that are very modern seems counter to having a precinct. So I am glad the IHP moved to reduce the precinct. So I think that we should vote this down to ensure that it doesn't apply to this area. Councillor Ferry.
Thank you. I won't be supporting the amendment either, and I think, as I asked about before, I think people have covered really well why this particular parcel probably the IHP got it about right. But what I particularly wanted to point to is the fact that we know that what happens next is that it goes to the Minister. The Minister has already made public comments that suggest that they won't be sympathetic to this rejection. So this is actually kind of a bit pointless, really. So I won't be supporting it.
Any other speakers? Councillor Fletcher.
I won't be supporting this amendment, but I do reserve the right and respect those who really have a long-standing commitment to heritage, and so it's a bit sad, I think, that we are having to vote on this amendment. However, I would hate to think that we come across as belittling those who want to raise issues as we work our way through this. Planning, as I said earlier, is a complex beast, and we need to spend plenty of time understanding what the consequences of what we're doing are. But on this occasion, I don't see the justification for the amendment and therefore can't support it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, just very briefly, in respect of the references to Whangapraoa and Waiheke Island, I don't see too many high rises or medium density buildings in Days Bay and the green hills of Eastbourne either, if we're talking about pandering to this particular minister.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, that's all the speakers? That's all the speakers? Thank you. Right, we'll take this. Sorry. I'll take this to the vote.
Division?
It's gone to a division.
Okay. Councillor Hills.
No.
Councillor Baker.
No.
Councillor Bartley.
No.
Mayor Brown. Councillor Dalton.
No.
Councillor Darby.
Against.
Councillor Ferry.
Against.
Councillor Filipina.
Kahore. No.
Councillor Fletcher.
No.
Councillor Foley.
Against.
Member Henare. No. Councillor Henderson.
No.
Councillor Lee. Councillor Leone.
No.
Councillor Newman. Councillor, Deputy Mayor Simpson.
Against.
Councillor Stewart.
No.
Councillor Turner.
No.
Councillor Walker. Yes. Councillor Watson. Councillor Williamson. No. 19. Alright.
It's voted down 19 votes to 2. So back to the substantive. There were no other amendments. Is there any debate on what we've got here? Is there any debate on the overall city centre recommendations, Councillor Darby?
You know, you win and you lose, but I just want to acknowledge the contributions that our staff have made here, and everything that we actually directed our staff to do has largely stood up through this process. If you look at the recommendations, they are largely in support of the council. And I think that's an important acknowledgement to make of ourselves and our teams doing this work. It's quite exhaustive. This is a really quite complex area. And I think it's commendable for the evidence that our teams have brought to that hearing process to stand the test of other evidence. And there have been some other very good experts that have contested council's evidence. In the example that we've just discussed is, you know, the other evidence has outlasted ours. But that's actually a very small example, really right across this. The evidence of this council has stood a very tough test. And I think we should acknowledge our staff, you know, our legal people, our planners, our experts in heritage, and cultural heritage, and the list goes on. They've done a tremendous job.
Thank you, Councillor Darby. Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, thanks. Look, I'll be as brief as I can be. Yeah, I too just want to acknowledge the staff for their hard work and long hours on this process, very complex work, and they've handled their tasks very diligently, and thank you for that. Look, I do have some reservations that I expressed sort of somewhat through my questions that, you know, I'm a child of Waitakere City, right, where metro centres didn't have height limits. We said that, hey, if you can make the economics work, we'll gladly take the housing and the associated economic activity and the vibrancy that comes with more residents and more local consumers. We had big dreams there. We didn't always get there, but I think that if anyone wants to start their home and their journey in the West, they should be able to do so, and they should be able to do so in the city centre as well. I want to be a constructive voice, so I'm still mulling over exactly what to do with my vote in this recommendation, because I kind of feel like I need to express my reservations, but at the same time there's practical realities to do with how this process works, so I don't really know what to do. But maybe I'll talk myself into it as I go. But yeah, look, it is an improvement on the current situation, so I'm not knocking it. And in fact, in some cases, a huge improvement. The dog's breakfast of previous zoning has kind of been sorted out, and we can rely on some more rational zoning that people can actually use. That's cool. We've gone up in many areas, and I think that's really cool as well. That's to be celebrated. But there is also a tinge of disappointment here, because, you know, look, there's scant evidence, in my view, of the benefits of restriction levels in some parts of the city. And this was one of the questions that I asked is, why are we doing 72.5? Why not 80? Why not 90? Places where you're very close to train stations that we've invested billions of dollars into building and servicing. I just don't know why, rationally, we would say to a developer that wants to build, that can make it work, that can provide the homes, nah, sorry, 72.5. You've got to downzone it. That's weird to me. Like, I don't know why we would have that ambition level as a city. That's so weird. We haven't gone far enough. And the other thing that I'll just warn everybody here is that when we don't go far enough with the city centre, that has ripple effects that you're not going to like in the discussions coming up. That will mean supporting more housing in the inner isthmus suburbs. It will. There's no avoiding it. Where we have these directions from the minister and the government, etc., we have to provide the capacity. We will have to move on view shafts that are outdated and that have no strong evidential support. We will have to move on special character areas, for sure. Places in the city that have the best access to jobs, to study, to public transport, places that by definition do not meet the heritage requirements. By definition, right? we will have to move on that. Because, you know, if we don't move on that, then that will mean more housing in outer areas. And, you know, I can see the public meetings now where people stand up in front of an angry local residents that say, we don't want the townhouses here, we don't want the intensification there. What are you going to say to them, right? This is where your vote here is so crucial, where we try and encourage as much housing in central isthmus areas that will mean the flow-on effects won't be as stark for communities that might be concerned in the outer suburbs. So, I don't know, I mean, I'm thinking, is the enemy of perfect the good here? Is that where I go? Or do I need to send a message through my vote that Auckland simply isn't ambitious enough as a city? It doesn't want to become a world-class city in its city centre, and it's not as serious as it needs to be to provide homes in the best places. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Member Henare.
Kia ora, Chair. Most people that have no affiliation to any political party and just want to get about their business out there, their words to the council would be hurry up and build the bloody thing. And nowhere is that more to the point than an article that I read yesterday or was it the day before about Smith and Coe's 145 years of trying to make a buck and a half over some extreme circumstances, and they managed to, but they couldn't manage the fact that our city is dead. They just couldn't manage it. And you know why it's dead? Because we've pushed everybody out to Te Aratu and every other residential area where I can't even drive my vehicle, admittedly it's a ute, down my own road without trying to not bump into something or somebody else's vehicle. If you don't have building in the city, people will look elsewhere. And hands up to those who want to come to Te Aratu Peninsula, there's no more room. There's just no more room. And so I'm in favour of this. In fact, I would have gone a bit further to hurry up the development that our city needs, because Smith and Coe's is not going to be the last one that moves out of here. It won't be. And by the time we get people living in the city, because it's a good city to live in, there won't be anything to buy. You know, all we'll have is a food town, a pack and save, and maybe some other nickel and dime outfit. Look, I just think we are on the verge of what could be if we do the right thing.
Kia ora, member. Thank you very much. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I'm supporting the recommendations. I'm fortunate enough to have travelled many places in the world, and I can't think of any large city, I mean, Auckland's the biggest city in our country, that doesn't have intensification in its city centre. So it is the most natural place for intensification, more natural than the suburbs. It's also really fortunate that it has Albert Park, Victoria Park, and is right next door to Pukekohe, the Auckland Domain. So right next door to what will be one of our most intensified parts of the city are some fantastic green open spaces as well. So I absolutely support this. I think it's the right thing to do, and the real reason, I suppose, is I'm really keen to do it right now and not have any delays, is it becomes operative pretty straight away. And so I agree with Haukura member Henare. I want the city centre to change, and I want it to change fast, and this is one way of making sure that happens. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Newman.
Chair, I don't really understand the speeches. This is a binary thing. You either support the IHP's recommendations or you don't. There's no evidence to not support it. So it's a wonderful discussion about the city centre, I mean, if people want to go and have their photo outside the Smith & Co's and explain that, I think there's some reasons why Smith & Co's is dying, and I think that we've probably contributed to that. But actually, this is about whether we support a recommendation from the IHP or not. It's binary. This shouldn't take too long.
Thanks, Councillor Newman. Councillor Turner.
No, Councillor.
If you did want to speak, you're welcome to speak, Councillor Turner.
I was going to speak to all the comments, and that's not the right thing, as Councillor Newman pointed out. We're just here to speak to what we have to vote for. So, thank you.
Right, no, yeah, and I'll just add briefly myself, I think this is good direction. I have asked for a bunch of advice on what we could have done to any uplifts or inclusions around that, the belt around this special height zone, but largely this is up to us. We, in 2022, if we wanted to show those larger heights, obviously there was 1,000 things going on, we should have put that in at the time, and it is a good message back to us for the unitary plan review. If there are further height increases or density increases, we have to be very clear, much like we will need to be through any plan change process. This is obviously a big jump with the removal of the FAR rules, but there's obviously more to go in the next few years if we start that unitary plan review, the new council, next year. But I hope that everyone supports this. It is a big step forward, but I know it does not go far enough for many. But I think it's a quite a straightforward vote today because of the way this process is about. So I'll go to the vote now. All those in favour?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Aye. No opposition, and Councillor Henderson would like his abstention noted.
So it's not carried unanimously?
No, I didn't. I said there was no votes opposed, but there was an abstention.
Oh, for the fence.
Okay, I'm not going through who... People have a right to vote however they want. There was no votes opposed.
I didn't catch that over the microphone. What was that?
I didn't hear, but I will not have people questioning other people's votes. We don't do that around here. There was no opposition. There was one abstention. Right. Thank you very much. We'll close the meeting there with there is no extraordinary business. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia. Kia ora tapinui, kia wātea, kia mama, tinako, te tinana. Me te wairoa e tara takatu, koia rā e rongo, whakairia ake ki runga kia tina. Homie, huie. Kia ora, thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.